think that takes away on freedom that the law is supposed to give us.
Yeah, the law by its nature is designed to limit freedom, absolutely. Or you have the purge every day, or what everybody thinks is right in their own eye. Well, the good news is that's not the end of that story. The story says after he charges her with 30 days or gives her 30 days in jail, it says the judge stands up, takes off his robe, walks down, stands next to his daughter, and he pays her fine. Do I need to let that sink in a little bit? Now, someone on Monday said, well, that's not fair. And I said, why? Well, because he's the judge. I said, but he took his robe off. His robe is the appearance of authority. He took his robe off. He went down, stood next to his daughter. He paid her fine. Now, we know statistically 97% of the time it's the father who kicks him out, but 3% of the time it's the mother. We have no idea what happened. We just know she got thrown out, no clothes, no money. She got hungry, and she admitted she's not a thief. She stole. She's guilty as charged. She accepted her punishment. And the judge gave her what she deserved. This goes back to the story about being at the beach and swimming out to get the beach ball, and then the next week it's your child and I'm not going out there because I can't make it, and then the week after that it's my child, and yeah, I'm going out there and I know I'm going to drown. Well, the law applies to everybody equally, right? No, it don't. That's the problem with ethics, is it doesn't. Remember we started, well, officer, to tell you what really happens, you caught me slowing down, I'm doing 127 in the Porsche, and you caught me doing 87, and I only get a 75 and a 55. Well, what about the law? What about the law? No lying, stealing, cheating, raping, and robbing. Red light, green light. No biting. We need the law. How do we operate without a framework? Which brings us to morality. What is the difference between ethics and morality? We've touched on it. Do you have something you want to share? Okay.
Continue the questions now with Mr. Wicker.
Dr. King, you said a moment ago that Alabama was a state that gives respectability to the resistance and defiance of the law. An observance of the law by local agencies in the South is one of the cardinal aims that you were seeking. Yet on March the 9th, you led the second march on Montgomery in violation of a federal injunction not to march. You said that order was unjust. And John Lewis, one of your colleagues, said that the Negroes had a constitutional right to march, injunction or no injunction. Now, was that in the spirit of nonviolence and the restraint that has always characterized your movement? And could you explain your reasoning in defying the court order that day?
Well, let me say two things to that, Mr. Wicker. First, I did not consider myself defying a court order that particular day. I consulted with my attorneys before the march, and they stated that they felt that it was an invalid order, and that it would not be, that I would not be in contempt of court, violating the court order if I led the march to the point of having a moral confrontation with the state troopers at the point where the people were brutalized on Sunday. So I still don't consider that breaking a court order or breaking what I consider an unjust law. On the other hand, I must be honest enough to say that I do feel that there are two types of laws. One is a just law and one is an unjust law. I think we all have moral obligations to obey just laws. On the other hand, I think we have moral obligations to disobey unjust laws, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. I think the distinction here is that when one breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust, he must do it openly, he must do it cheerfully, he must do it lovingly, he must do it civilly, not uncivilly, and he must do it with a willingness to accept the penalty. And any man who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and willingly accepts the penalty by staying in jail in order to arouse the conscience of the community on the injustice of the law is at that moment expressing the very highest respect for law.
morality is a function of conscience, recognizing that some laws are unjust laws. So in 1848, we did away with slavery by the Emancipation Proclamation because that law was unfair. And people resisted that law, most civilly, some uncivilly, some with violence. They accepted the consequences of that. And eventually, that resistance, based on moral conscience, brought enough tension to the situation where the law was changed. It was motivated by what we call the moral conscience. There are times when laws are unjust. 1920, the 19th Amendment, women received the right to vote. That all men and women are created by their Creator with certain inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Civil resistance occurred. They marched in the streets. They did things that they were told they couldn't do. In court, they were not allowed to speak. Katie Stanton and Lucretia Mott stood up and spoke anyway and defied the court. And they were found in contempt of the court. And after 100 years of resistance, the 19th Amendment is passed. 26th Amendment is passed, and you can vote now when you're 18. You can no longer get drunk and have to go off and fight other people's wars. You can now vote for or against them. 1963, the Civil Rights Amendment was passed. 1960, the Voters' Rights Act was passed. By the way, does anyone know how many bubbles are in a bar of soap? That was one of the voting right tests for the African American in the South. You had to tell them how many bubbles were in a bar of soap, and if you couldn't get it right, you were illiterate and you didn't get the right to vote. You didn't pass the literacy test. By the way, how many bubbles are there in a bar of soap? No one knows. That's how you fix the table. 1968, Civil Rights Act of 68, you can no longer discriminate against people when it comes to owning property, buying houses based on race or gender or any other conditions. And all of that happened because people felt like they had a moral obligation, a moral conscience to resist unfair laws, unjust laws. Ethics equals what? The law. We need a value on ethics. We need a way to value the freedoms that we have by reducing the bad behavior so that most of us benefit from good behavior. But that doesn't make the law always right. We are littered in history with laws that we've decided are unjust. The divine right of kings, that you're someone else's property. We got rid of that one. It took till 1698 to get rid of it, but we got rid of it. And Dr. King was clear, there's no carte blanche, there's no free meal ticket to just resist laws just because you don't like it. You'll end up being put in jail. During the 60s and 70s, we got put in jail during the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement in Vietnam, the migrant workers movement out in California with Cesar Chavez. When you resist the law always carries a penalty. Those in power really aren't real happy about having to relinquish their power. That's why you're still working for $8 an hour. It's been very hard to get it up to $15. There's a law passed, what's her name, Lee Litterman? It was passed under President Obama's administration that women now have to get equal pay for equal work. How long has that taken? And you're still not paid equal pay for equal work. Because those in authority, those who have their hands on the mechanism of the law, find it very hard to share that power. It's exclusive, people. And so the question before us today is, what's the difference between ethics and morality? Well, the law needs to have a value. But if the laws turn out to be not just laws, there are those throughout history who said we have a moral obligation to resist that evil, to do our best to rectify the injustices so we get justice. So when we get to capital punishment, we'll find out we have now sentenced 1,558 people to death for murder, and it turns out we're wrong 151 times. And the greatest injustice is executing someone who hasn't committed a crime, even though we think he has. Or the few times we execute a woman, we think she has. So morality becomes a huge part of applied ethics. What do we do if we finally admit or come to the realization that we have enacted unjust laws? Everybody see where morality comes into play here? Now, what you all said about morality was fine. We're just exploring. Now, why do we have unjust laws? Do you ever drive in a car and you get those stones come up and they bang your windshield and they put that little spider thing in there? And if you bump along enough, you get a crack along. I've been in cars with a crack right across the windshield. We can't drive them until they blow out, and then you better get another windshield. You get a ticket for not having a windshield, not because it blew out. You have to have a windshield. What if this? This is the deep question of philosophy that people don't want to deal with. Did you ever have a plate that had a crack in it? You put it in the micro, it works. Until it doesn't work. Then you get another plate, right? And sooner or later that plate does what? Cracks. What if the problem with all of this is embedded in the law? What if the problem's embedded in us? There's a deep question. Maybe the Sentinel had it right. What was the name of the movie with Neo in it? The Matrix. In a way, we're kind of a virus. You know? Look, if we weren't imperfect, we'd have perfect laws, wouldn't we? Maybe we need to acknowledge where the problem lies. And once we do that, we acknowledge the fact that we're not going to get it right all the time. We should then be willing, from a moral perspective, to quickly assess the error of our ways and do our best to correct it. When you have a bad law, you change it. When you have a law that's unfair, you change it. When you have a law that oppresses people, you change it. Because that's in the best interest of everybody. So why don't we do that? Why are women still waiting to get paid the same amount of money as men do? Why are people still being disenfranchised when it comes to elections? That was not a rhetorical question. That was a question. Go ahead, dear. Say loud.
Because part of our human nature is that we don't like to admit that we're wrong.
Does everybody hear that? Maybe not only do we have a fractured nature, but part of our nature is we don't like to admit we're doing wrong. How many of you, when you're in northern Michigan, where I raised my kids, we bought a house when I had 2, and then next thing I knew I had 4. I needed more space. I didn't need a garage, so I did construction in my life. So I went out in the garage and I turned it into living room space. Built another bedroom in the back for my oldest boy, and then we built a kind of a kitchenette and some areas over here, and we connected the 2 through the garage. And it was during the winter. In northern Michigan, you get 200, 250 inches of snow. I mean, it is cold for at least 6 months. It's cold. And you're out there in a garage and there's no heat, and I'm not going to pay for heat. You just wear your Mackinac and you moor a little slower. And all I have left is the closet, and it turns out to be Jamie's bedroom. And we finish dinner and it's cold, and I go out and put on my Mackinac, and I get in the closet, and I'm like, now I've done construction, rough frame construction, for when I was in grad school and to make a living different times during my life. And I walk out there and I'm in the closet, and there's this huge wet spot in the corner. And I know the ceiling is not leaking because I put the ceiling on there. I know what I'm doing.